Mr. O'Keefe was not injured and was not killed at where he was located.
Watching him cross-examine Deaver.
Like, you can't remember my name. I don't remember.
Don't call her Deaver.
Mr. Proctor says, from all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job, and then uses the C word.
So don't spell it. You go ahead and say them.
Cunt.
Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah, she's a babe.
Yeah, she's a babe.
Weird Fall River accent, though.
Weird Fall River accent, though.
No ass.
No ass.
She's a whack job cunt.
Bob's a boxer. Bob is a take charge guy. And, you know, I just couldn't control myself. I love this man so much. It wasn't enough to hug him.
David and Bob, the lawyers that were part of Karen's dream team, were interviewed last night. Let's see what they both have to say.
I had to physically lift him up. And poor Bob, he's got a bad neck. He wanted to get me back. And he tried to pick me up. I don't know if the camera caught it. But I've never met anyone in my life who maybe gets 2 or 3 hours of sleep.
He's speaking about Bob Alessi here.
A night. And that is not an exaggeration. He is up and he loves the law so much. He's working. He works out like a madman. And he, you know, the amount of work that he gets done is incredible.
What was it like working across from Hank Brennan?
For the vast majority of the trial, it was very good. We got along very well professionally. There were a lot of things behind the scenes that we agreed upon with regard to certain evidence just to make it more efficient.
Love him or hate him, Hank is a grandmaster trial attorney. Bob Alessi works for one of the largest firms in the world, generally representing large corporate entities. I went against their firm when it was called Piper Rudnick. It's now DLA Piper. When you look them up, you will see that they only hire high-quality attorneys, and Karen was lucky that old Bob Alessi came over to her side and helped defend her. We didn't generally argue over trite things, and that's what I think skilled lawyers have an obligation to the system to do. Code it whatever way you want, but he was the opponent. He's prosecuting our client and asking for her liberty, her freedom to be taken away forever. And in the end, that's the lens through which I need to view any prosecutor, and especially Attorney Brennan. We had the better grasp of the science, the data, the physics, the medicine. Secondly, importantly, we had the better experts. We had the more knowledgeable people, the people who looked at this using the scientific method. You know, people probably heard enough from me about confirmation bias and scientific method. And Karen's attorneys were definitely better looking. It turns out they revealed that Yannetti was 62 years old and old Bob here is 67. I'm not sure how much experience the prosecution had with regard to truly cross-examining experts. I cross-examined every one of the Commonwealth's experts. It's a different world cross-examining experts, as you know from your vast experience. Bob's firm, DLA Piper, generally doesn't represent small individuals. However, they probably gave him an exception to go ahead and do this. It's smart for his business. He probably makes a salary between $1 and $2 million, and since he's a partner, he gets a partnership share, which can be even greater than that, probably $2 to $3 million, maybe even more each year. And if you don't do it the way that is merited by the situation, you can end up with double-digit owned goals. And I think that happened.
I thought it was actually quite striking to see some of the differences both in the quality of experts, because watching the trial, like really the prosecution expert who I might want to call was Dr. Wolf.
Sure. My first name is Isaac, A-I-Z-I-K. It's phonetic. Last name is Wolf, W-O-L-F, like the real thing.
Daniel Michael Wolf, last name spelled W-O-L-F-E.
Wolf, W-O-L-F, like the real thing.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a brain surgeon.
Bragger.
If I was sitting here making a list of like who out of this list would I bring on a trial of mine, Dr. Wolf I'd have no problem with.
He's referring to the prosecution's expert, Dr. Wolf, who was a brain surgeon down in Florida.
He straight up said, we see this all the time. Somebody falls and this injury and they die.
The only way he could get this kind of an injury was to fall backwards, hit the back of his head. Very frequently, patients that are drunk fall down on ice sidewalks and could develop lacerations in their head.
When you explained that the brain upon impact then shifts forward and hits the front of the skull. Is there a medical term for that process?
The medical term is a coup counter coup injury.
Are there symptoms that result of the process coup counter coup?
A coup counter coup.
Who the hell ever heard of a coup counter coup? A coup counter coup? I thought that was the name of my Middle Eastern neighbor.
In coup counter coup, how many times have you experienced that as a medical examiner, that condition?
Well, I myself haven't experienced it, which was good. But in cases, hundreds of cases.
Clinically, it varies. I mean, you can go from anywhere from a simple concussion all the way to, ultimately being in a coma.
The brilliance of Bob Alessi in terms of his cross-examination of Dr. Wolf, it was one of the most unorthodox starts. It was very clear that their Dr. Wolf was a brilliant man.
I'm a brain surgeon.
A very experienced witness.
I get up every day at 4:30 in the morning to go to work. 5 days a week. I take call 300 days out of 365 days a year.
Maybe gets 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. He is up. He loves the law so much. He's working. He works out like a madman.
Did you work yesterday?
Yes, I did.
What type of work did you do yesterday?
I did 2 brain surgeries yesterday.
Bragger.
And very confident. And he was going to be a big challenge to cross-examine. But if you'll remember, Bob started his cross-examination by introducing himself, saying it's a pleasure to meet you.
Morning, doctor. I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me about your normal day.
I wake up at 4:15 in the morning. I go to my center. I set up patients with frames for their either radiosurgical procedures or stereotactic craniotomies. I go home, I make cappuccino for my wife at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I get back to work at 6:30.
This Dr. Wolf's a player and he knows how to play the game. All the women were swooning over him. First, he's a doctor, which women love. Second, he's up early out of the house, which women especially appreciate. But third, he's back at the house by 6 a.m. making his wife a cappuccino. The women were in love with this guy.
And move on.
Dr. Wolf was an experienced witness, and he was happy to talk about what he does during the day, including, getting up early and making his wife coffee.
Hey, Yannetti, that's a cappuccino, not a coffee.
I make cappuccino for my wife at 6 o'clock in the morning.
These seem to be the softball questions. Bob extended that day into a week. Geez, that your day is fascinating and you're doing important work, but I didn't hear anything about forensic pathology. Which is the topic that he was called on to testify to. I think at that point, Dr. Wolf realized he had been had, and he got a little angry on the stand and said, well, you could have just asked me if I'm a forensic pathologist. I'm not.
How do you manage to learn 6, 7, 8 different fields? How do you possibly do that?
That's a great question posed to Bob because he is an attorney, but when he questions experts about medicine, he needs to know more than them.
I went to pharmacy school before law school, so I had every chemistry, physics, calculus known to man. I'll stay up all night to read about them and to learn them, and it's a joy for me to do. The fact that I don't sleep much allows me to have about 1.7 times a life than others.
During this interview, both attorneys admitted they joined Equinox and would work out constantly together in between trial days.
Decided not to call Trooper Proctor. And you guys did great work on getting Proctor's texts in, but there was the decision not to call Proctor! And this was probably the most contested decision among sort of the law tube community. Can you talk about sort of that decision and why that was...
Where is Proctor?
Why that was made? What was the thinking there?
Yeah, we can't speak much about that issue. There were significant evidentiary battles as a result of our decision not to call Proctor.
Proctor?
And there were several attempts by the prosecution to try to force us to call former Trooper Proctor.
Proctor!
That was a fight that went on pretty much through the whole trial.
I wanted them to call Proctor, and I don't think it would have backfired at all. It's not my decision. They were the ones that made it, and fortunately it worked out for Karen.
Now, some people may not believe that the impact from merely reading them as opposed to seeing former Trooper Proctor on the stand was what they had perhaps hoped for. I have a completely different review, respectfully, than those folks.
In this case, you know, I felt like we had really three boogeymen. We had Trooper Proctor with those text messages.
Cunt.
We had Brian Albert, who didn't come out of his house.
What am I supposed to do? Run out front in my underwear and start running yellow tape around the fire hydrant?
And we had Brian Higgins, who really looked nefarious in this trial.
You didn't say goodbye or walk over and give John a big hug or anything like that? An acknowledgement, did you?
No.
You just left?
Well, that's what everybody was doing, just leaving.
Okay. You too, correct?
I did leave, yes.
For some reason, old Higgy Bear left out the fact that he was taunting and threatening John as he was leaving.
And you didn't say goodbye to John, correct?
I don't think I said goodbye to anybody.
The address and sort of where you were going. Did you know where you were going that night?
I knew where I was going, yes.
Are you familiar with the address and where you were going? Did you know where you were going that night? And he says, I knew where I was going, yes. Again, we have a statement before the yes, so that is extra information. And the way he says it, I knew where I was going, yes. That tells you that he's a man on a mission. The question would have been sufficiently answered with just a yes.
This is Sergio De Niro from the YouTube channel Truth Revealed. He's a human lie detector test. He used to work for the federal government.
Which would have fit Higgins' baseline. This tells me that he is expecting a confrontation with O'Keefe, and it's probably based on the conversation that he had with O'Keefe. It seems like he wants to hash something out, and I'm willing to bet that it has to do with Karen Reed.
You didn't talk to him about coming over to 34 Fairview?
No.
Yet at 2:20 in the morning, you texted John O'Keefe, you coming here. Sorry, 12:20.
I did.
And that had 3 question marks behind it, correct?
Yes.
Did you text Karen about coming over to 34 Fairview?
No.
So at 12:20 a.m., you were more interested in getting John to come to 34 Fairview than you were to getting Karen to come to 34 Fairview.
No, that's not how I would describe that.
That's exactly how Sergio De Niro described it, and he was spot on.
But you didn't text Karen, correct?
No, I didn't.
But you did text John.
Yes.
In a way that he did not in the last trial. The boogeymen were humanized in trial 1.
My initial thought on it was actually, you've got to get Proctor. What are they doing?
Where is Proctor?
Partially just the text and the moment where Proctor's good friend was unwilling to read them.
Jonathan Diamandis, Diamandis.
Sir, do you know former Trooper Michael Proctor?
I do.
How do you know him?
We've been friends since middle school, approximately 30 years.
Having known Michael Proctor for as long as you have, does he have any nicknames?
Chip and Bear. I'm sure the owner of the house will receive some shit.
And could you read Mr. Proctor's 2 responses?
Nope. A homeowner is a Boston cop too. These are not my words. I'm not really comfortable reading these. Do I?
Aw, this good-looking tough guy can't read some words?
I have to say these words out loud.
I don't want you to say words that are not yours, so I'll say the words, and I'm going to ask you if I'm reading accurately. Is that better?
Yes.
Mr. Proctor says, from all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job, and then uses the C word.
So don't spell it. You go ahead and say them.
Cunt.
Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Yeah, she's a babe.
Yeah, she's a babe.
Weird Fall River accent, though.
Weird Fall River accent, though.
No ass.
No ass.
She's a whack job cunt.
Who do you think wore it better, Proctor or Brennan?
He didn't do a thing wrong. She's a whack job cunt. 16 hours into this investigation.
Yes.
Into your objective and unbiased, thorough investigation, correct?
Correct.
Is there any part of the actual investigation that you would do over?
I wouldn't change anything.
Nothing.
No.
The other thing that sort of brought me around on that was watching him cross-examine Deaver.
Like, you can't remember my name. I don't remember.
And
don't call her Deaver.
D-E-V-E-R.
Might appear as a 4th cube if you do that, Ian.
What the hell is this nerd talking about? He said she might appear as a 4th cube. I have no idea what he's talking about.
But just watching her and watching Brennan, like, feed her excuses.
When we were arguing about whether we had to call Proctor or not, I finally just revealed it in open court during an argument. I was like, we should not have to call Trooper Proctor so that Mr. Brennan can make his closing argument during cross-examination. In our case, I didn't think it was a close call.
One thing you really wanted to get into or to address that you couldn't.
Number one for me ARCA was hired by the Department of Justice. That was off limits from the moment it was mentioned to the judge that the federal investigation existed.
He was asked about the most important piece of evidence that he wasn't able to get in. David's referring to the fact that ARCA was initially hired by the federal government. The fact that ARCA was initially hired by the FBI is extremely prejudicial to both sides, especially since we don't know who they were investigating and why they were doing it.
She was not going to let us go there, and she didn't. I thought that was very relevant information. The jury should have known the genesis of how they came into the case. In the last trial, we had feedback from jurors. Some of them thought that ARCA was hired by Karen's insurance company.
They're referring to juror Ronnie, who was interviewed by Turtle Boy, who said he thought that ARCA was either hired by Karen's insurance company or maybe even Turtle Boy himself.
My piece of evidence that's on the top of my list is the alternative theory as to what happened, namely that Mr. O'Keefe was not injured and was not killed at where he was located. That was someplace else, and we had
the garage,
and we were not allowed to proffer even the evidence, let alone push the theory. And we had tremendous evidence backed by facts, backed by experts, and we were not allowed to go there.
The photos that Turtle Boy has tweeted out of the garage, is this consistent with the, the mark on the head? Was that sort of part of where you wanted to go with that?
Those are photos allegedly of the garage inside 34 Fairview. The defense had them, but they were never able to get them admitted as evidence.
The photos there?
We arrived at 34 Fairview. It didn't look like there was any soiree going on. It didn't look inviting. The outside was dark.
This is Karen describing the moment they pulled up to 34 Fairview.
And I didn't see any familiar looking vehicles. And I said, John, can you make sure we're welcome? And he said, I'll run in. So when John got out of the car at Brian Albert's house, he took my full vodka soda, which is sitting in the cup holder.
Remember, it's a law in Canton, Massachusetts that you must have a minimum blood alcohol level of 0.10% in order to operate a motor vehicle.
And he walked up the driveway, driveway.
You were among the first to arrive because you were doing that thing with the sort of playing around by plowing his driveway.
It was a sweep of the driveway, yeah.
There were about 5 statements that Higgy Bear made during his testimony that triggered something inside me, saying that he was being so dishonest and so misleading. And the sweep of the driver was one of them. When I first heard it, I knew this was something that was so misleading. But the real question is, why is he saying this? And we're about to find out.
And he walked up the driveway.
It looked like he had done something to the driveway.
He may have skimmed, yeah, he had a plow on his truck, and I think he may have plowed the driveway.
Well, I was kind of being a smart ass, and I dropped the plow, and I did a little sweep of the driveway.
And he walked up the driveway.
And then I got out of the driveway because I didn't want to get blocked in, and I parked.
Well, I was kind of being a smart ass, and I dropped the plow, and I did a little sweep of the driveway, and then I got out of the driveway because I didn't want to get blocked in, and I parked. The reason Higgins got out of the driveway was not because he didn't want to get blocked in.
And he walked up the driveway.
The explanatory plus a negative statement makes that statement deceptive. It's a simple statement. So we have to figure out, what's the deception here? Being a smartass? No, I think he's truthful on that. I dropped the plow, I did a little sweep of the driveway, and then I got out of the driveway because I didn't want to get blocked in. The lie is actually here. I did a little sweep of the driveway. How could that be a lie? Why would you lie about that? And the answer is, the lie is in the time. I don't think that he actually did the sweep of the driveway before Higgins got there. Probably thinking, of course he did. That's how the timeline goes. But that is not what the language is telling us here. But something as big as a sweep of the driveway, if it's mentioned, it's important information. So we cannot disregard this no matter what. But we have a serious question mark here of the time, because it's deceptive. I want to reinforce the fact that this is a very problematic statement. He's giving you a timeline, and his language is telling you that he's giving you wrong, inaccurate information.
We know from the weather charts and video surveillance there wasn't enough snow on the ground to sweep it, whether to do it as a joke or to actually help them. So why did he do it?
And he walked up the driveway.
And the answer's right there. When John O'Keefe left Karen's SUV, he created a trail, footprints throughout the entire snow. Higgins did not do the sweep before. He did it when he left to cover any tracks that John made that led right into the house.
And I saw him reach the breezeway door, which is the side front door. And he opened the door and went to walk in.
Karen admitted she wasn't paying such close attention as to which door she went in because she had the music blasting, she had her heater going, and also she was drunk. But we do know when Higgins was questioned by the federal authorities, he admitted someone else came into the house. Did John go into that doorway right there, or did he go through the garage? That we're going to find out soon enough. Because it was dark, he was drunk, and John's never been to this house, he easily could have went into this door, which leads right into the garage. And as you can see, the defense had this picture. Is that blood? Is that paint? Is that paint splattered over blood to cover it up? And could this have been where Higgy Bear attacked John O'Keefe and his head fell onto this wood? Inch by inch, day by day, we are getting closer to figuring out exactly what happened to John O'Keefe. And as of right now, all the evidence is pointing to Higgy Bear, the #1 suspect. We didn't see old Higgy Bear on TV, and it wasn't because he was hibernating. I believe he got the legal advice not to speak to anyone, anywhere. And I wonder why.